This cold chamber is just a fridge. It's just a giant fridge that goes down to about -8, -9, -10. And I sit there in a pair of shorts and a vest with a thermometer about so long inside me. Yes. Yeah. And that was part of my training.
Hello everyone, my name is Thea Darracott. I'm the Acting Executive Retail Editor and Events Director at Condé Nast Traveller. Some of you might be familiar with our Traveller's Tales series that we run in London as a series of live events. During this time of lockdown, we've decided to extend that to Zoom conversations. And I'm very excited to be joined now by Phoebe Smith and Dwayne Fields, whose titles are so long that I'm going to have to read them out because you've achieved so much. So Phoebe, oh my goodness, you're known for extreme sleeping, which we'll come to. You're also a presenter, broadcaster, author, editor, photographer, and sleep storyteller in residence at calm.com, which I'm a big fan of.
Oh, thank you.
Blue Gold story is amazing. Whenever that's amazing. Dwayne, you're also a presenter, explorer, naturalist, and the first Black Briton to have walked over 400 miles to the magnetic North Pole, which is extraordinary. So I wanted to start by asking what brought you both together?
So me and Dwayne sort of knew of each other being in the adventure world. And both followed each other on social media, and we actually met though in person the first time outside Buckingham Palace. So we were both there to give out Duke of Edinburgh Gold Awards to young people, and we got to talking, and Dwayne kept trying to make it so I couldn't get in, but we both got in. Went and had a cup of tea with the Queen's China, and did our stuff for the D.of.E. and then we sort of kept in touch, but we didn't see each other again until a year later at another palace, which was Blenheim Palace. So for a while we joked we only ever met when we were at palaces. And we were both on a panel at a Countryfile live event, talking about barriers that might stop people getting into the outdoors and adventure. And I was there as the one woman on the panel, talking about being a woman in adventure in the outdoors. And Dwayne was there, obviously, as a Black man, and we really enjoyed taking part in the panel. And through taking part in the panel, I think we realised that we both had similar experiences of people telling us we couldn't and we shouldn't because of reasons we can't control. And so when the panel finished, we continued the conversation and started talking about an expedition we wanted to do together and what we wanted to get from that expedition. So from that came the idea for our Antarctic first that we want to do, but also came the idea of this legacy of forming the We Too Foundation, which is a foundation that we can raise money for to help underprivileged young people across Britain, to help get them to see that adventure, the outdoors, the environment, wildlife can all be used as a tool for good to sort of change their situation and give them hope and positive messages for the future.
It seems to be a running theme whenever I talk to adventurers or explorers, and there's such passion about conveying this message to future generations. Dwayne, I just wanted to ask you a bit about the work that you did, because you're involved with the Scouts, is that correct?
Yes, so I am. I'm really, really happy about that, actually, because I was a Scout when I was little myself. So my work with the Scouts is about looking at young people's different situations and ways that we can engage them, engage different communities and bring more young people into Scouting, as well as, this is a plug now, we need more volunteers. My work is focused on how we can support young people more, get them more active, get them more engaged in what's happening in their local communities, and get them to be more rounded adults, actually.
And tell me about you in the Scouts. What age, when did you get involved? Talk me through that journey.
My story as a Scout started completely by accident. So I was 7, 8 years old, and my friend's mum, who was meant to drop me home, said, look, I'm running late, I'll drop you home after I take Stavros to Scouts. Obviously for me, I'm an 8-year-old kid, I'm like, yeah, whatever. It's more time to play, more time to have fun. I don't care when I go home. And she took me to the Scout hut, and I was a really shy little kid. And I remember this guy came out and Stavros ran in, and the guy saw me standing there, another little kid, and he goes, oh, are you a new member? And being so shy and scared and nervous, I looked at him and looked at my friend's mom, and I looked at him, and through all of this, I couldn't answer. So she just looked at me and said, "Oh no, he's not here to start." And he goes, "Well, why not? Bring him in, and let's let him take part." So I went in, had fun, and for the first time since leaving Jamaica, I was able to kind of impart some of the skills that I had acquired as a child. As a kid in Jamaica, I'd make things. Every toy I had, I made with my own two hands. So now I could make something and show other kids how to make something. And for me, it was the first time I felt like I was useful or valuable since coming to this country.
And I think that's something that is so important as well for so many kids. There's this disconnection with nature, especially inner city kids. When you were younger and you're looking at the people who are conquering these mountains,
oh yes,
poles and expanses of dangerous land, was it off-putting that you didn't feel like there was someone that you could necessarily relate to?
As a kid, I've always loved being outdoors. I've always loved the adventure of climbing that tree or climbing that building, or what's down that path, or let me try and cross this river with a raft that I built myself. Now, when I read books that was in line with that narrative, I never once saw anyone that looked like me. And to be honest, I didn't see anyone that looked like you or Phoebe either. Yeah. And that's the truth. It was always this strong, bustling, bearded man who, wearing some kind of bear coat. It was a white male. And he'd stand at the top of this mountain, look down and say, "Look at what I've conquered." That doesn't fill me with the kind of sense that that's something that I could achieve. I never once saw it. I never once saw any image of another Black person, especially from Jamaica, equally, especially from East London, doing anything like this, being an adventurer. In fact, when I first decided I was going to do something adventurous like the Arctic, most people from my community, and that's Black, white, Asian, Turkish, my community said, "What are you doing that for? That's a stupid idea." Before I told anyone, I told the local newspaper, because I knew once I'd written it, or once it'd been written, that's it, it has to be done now. And I was so ready for everyone to just bombard me with negativity that the date was in the paper. My phone rang, and the first phone call I looked at, it was a friend of mine, and I answered the phone saying, "Hello?" And I expected him to say, this is what he said, "Bruv, are you climbing the North Pole?" And I was like, first of all, idiot, you don't climb the North Pole. It's just a point in the ground, that magnetism and all that goes. And I was ready for an argument, because I knew that they'd all try and take this idea and suck the joy and suck all the hopes that I had for this achievement out of me. So that's what I was dealing with. I didn't have anyone that I could look at and say, "I want to be like this person," except for one individual I came across, a man called Matthew Henson. I did all this research, and his was the one name of a Black adventurer that I could say, "Oh, actually, he sounds a little bit like me. He looks a little bit like me. He might have experienced similar things to me."
And Phoebe, tell me about being a woman in a very male-dominated profession as well. How was that for you? How is that going?
Well, when I was very young, I very similar to Dwayne. You'd read books or see images of people who were explorers or adventurers, and they would all be one definite type of person. From a well-off background. They'd probably been in the military. They were male. They had beards, and it was all about them conquering this thing. And the only female who I saw in the press doing this was a climber called Alison Hargreaves, who sadly, I was only in primary school at the time, but I really clearly remember when she died on K2, and the press just went crazy, criticising her because she had 2 children and she'd left them with her husband to go and do this mountain. And I, even at a young age, remember thinking, "Oh, but no one ever says that to the men who do this, and they have children too, and who they left but with the mother." So it always seemed to be a bit of a taboo thing that a woman would choose to go off and do these adventurous things, which definitely makes you feel like maybe that's not for you. But it took me actually traveling and doing things that were outside of my comfort zone, as you tend to do when we travel. We tend to take more risks. We tend to sign up to do a bungee jump or a skydive when we might not do it if we were back home. And I actually, when I was out in Australia, I was persuaded to go and sleep in a swag bag, a rollaway bag in the middle of the Red Centre. And I'd hated camping. I tried it once as a kid and absolutely hated it. I was too cold. I was scared. It was awful. But because I was abroad, because I was traveling, I signed up and did it. And before we got into bed, the guide gave us a list of all these critters that were out there that could apparently kill you. And I remember thinking, how come I'm trying this here where everything in Australia seems to be able to kill you somehow, but I've never done this at home in my own country where there's nothing that I have to worry about like that. So I did it, and I spent this incredible night, you know, watching the sunset, watching the wildlife come out, listening to the owls, like waking up in the morning and seeing the sunrise. And I thought, wow, I'm addicted. I want more of this. And that kind of was a real cataclysmic shift for me to start doing these things, and not just start doing them, but writing about it and putting myself out there, warts and all. Like, I would be very honest about the mistakes I made, which were a lot. And I think even now, me and Dwayne still make lots of mistakes.
All the time.
But it was to kind of break down that barrier of this superhero adventurer and just be it about normal people doing adventurous things. And crucially, which is what you'll tend to see from me and Dwayne on our social channels when we're doing these adventures, is we want to have a good time. We want to laugh at each other. We want to laugh at ourselves. We want to laugh at the ridiculously sometimes of the situation. And I think by doing that, you're suddenly humanizing explorers and adventurers. And, you know, yes, when I wrote books, I got a lot of criticism from a certain sector of males in society who didn't like that there was this younger woman telling people that it's not hard, anyone can do this, I'm not special, if I can do it, you can do it. And there was a backlash against that. And even now I get criticized in the same way that I'm sure Dwayne still gets people from his community saying, why are you doing this? Other people don't do this, we shouldn't do this. But that's why it's even more important, and I think why we're so committed to work together to reach as many people as possible, to say, let's deconstruct this narrative of the all-powerful explorer and just say, hey, we're all like you, and this is fun. We can do it and have a good time, and you can come too.
You have made it so approachable, not just by representing other groups of people who otherwise were not in these pictures of people on the top of mountains, but also I think in the way that you communicate it, because it's not just about an expedition like the one that we're going to come to soon about Antarctica, which is going to cost, I imagine, a lot of money, but also the other things that you're doing, which anyone can actually do. And I think that's incredible, because it is just about getting out and enjoying nature. So Phoebe, I actually, on that note, want to ask you about extreme sleeping. What is it?
Well, when I first started wild camping, for me, an extreme sleep was my very first solo wild camp, because believe it or not, you know, I mean, this was nearly 12 years ago now, when I first started telling friends and family, I want to go and do this wild camp, but I want to do it by myself, because I'd been with friends and, you know, been with colleagues, but there was something about going out there on your own, completely like vulnerable to, you had to take responsibility for everything. And I couldn't believe how many people were like, you can't do that. That's too dangerous. You know, men and women were both saying it to me. I had people tell me I'd be mugged, I'd be attacked. Someone even said I'd be eaten by a bear, even though I was going to Wales. I wasn't going to like, you know, the Rockies or somewhere in Canada or Alaska. And so there was this huge pressure of you can't, you shouldn't. And I thought, well, I'm stubborn. I'm a bloody minded woman. I'm going to get this done. And so for me, that first sleep felt extreme, because I was doing something that everyone told me I shouldn't or wouldn't be able to do. But of course, after I survived that, and, you know, many things went wrong. I was chased by sheep. I was bitten by midges and trying to find caves which had history to them and spend the night there. I was sleeping on top of mountains, and more pushing this adventurous kind of sleeping of what can I do, you know, hammocking high in the trees. And it sort of culminated a few years ago when I decided to give up Christmas to sleep the 3 peaks. So sleep on the top of the highest mountain in England, Wales and Scotland on consecutive nights over Christmas, to try and raise money for Centrepoint, which is the Young People's Homeless charity, because my thinking was I get to choose these kind of wacky places I'm spending the night, but these young people don't, and they need help. So I did sleep the 3 peaks, and just did it on my own, just with a tent, and set out to raise £500 and ended up raising over 8,000. So I thought there's definitely something in this. So then the following summer, I'd met some friends who taught me how to climb fixed ropes, and we set about getting permission to go and dangle on portaledges. So these are these climbing tents that they tend to use on these big walls when they're climbing multi-pitch, multi-day routes. and suspend ourselves from 10 UK landmarks on consecutive nights, again to raise money for the homeless. And we spent the night sleeping on sea cliffs in Scotland, off a theatre in Bradford, off the Centrepoint Tower in central London, the Spinnaker Tower down in Portsmouth. And it was just this incredible 10 nights of barely any sleep, but absolutely incredible. And again, it captures people's imagination because you're doing something that visually looks insane, and is kind of putting yourself through it.
So but you got barely any sleep whilst doing this. Did you manage to?
Yeah, well, yeah, getting to sleep was no problem. It was just, to fix these tents takes a long time because they need 4 ropes that are all fixed on multiple points, all on different places, 2 for the hanging tent and 2 for yourself. And so by the time you've rigged them, it was turning out to be about 2-3 in the morning when we were ready to get into bed. And then because of the drive time between the different landmarks we were going to, we were having to wake up at 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning, so we'd get this tiny window of sleep. I mean, falling asleep wasn't a problem. We were so exhausted by the time we lay down. It was just like, oh, but yeah, it was tiring work. We didn't get all the sleep. We actually started to jokingly call it it was called the Extreme Sleep Out, and we changed the name to the Extreme Sleep Deprivation Challenge because it really was that. But then of course that was great practice for what came later, which was obviously the more recent expedition that me and Dwayne did for our We Too Foundation, which was walking and wild camping the length of mainland Britain, which took 40 nights. So 40 nights in predominantly rain. I'm remembering that right, Dwayne, right?
Yeah. We swam, we probably swam half the journey. Honestly, it went from extreme cold, which was -7, 8 in the Cairngorms, frost, snow, cold, rain, wet, to just constant rain. Yeah. Literally. And then there were hills that lasted for days.
Everyone said once we got down past, once you get past the Welsh border, it's plain sailing.
No,
there were
it's
so
not.
many hills.
You'll be surprised at how big Scotland is.
Oh, yeah, that was our shock. At first, we felt like the first, I'd say 5 days, we kept looking at the map going, we've
only done this much of it.
What's happening?
Do you know, I'd make the map on my phone smaller so it looked like we did more, but it didn't help.
Dwayne, I wanted to ask you about the North Pole as well, because
it's
such a challenging place. And I can imagine it's an incredibly lonely place as well.
Oh, yeah.
How did you prepare for something like that?
Would you believe the preparation was harder than the actual event itself? So first of all, just bear in mind, I'm a black guy born in Jamaica, grew up in London. The coldest place I'd ever experienced was London. Now,
cold there, Dwayne.
it does, yeah. A whole freezing cold, -4. So there I am in London. I decided I'm going to take on this challenge, and I don't know how to train. I don't know how to prepare. This is the biggest thing I've ever done. So I go online, I start looking at, training for Antarctica or training for the Arctic and training for mountains, thinking it's all the same. And I came across this one thing where it was a video of someone pulling a pulk. And I thought, ooh, a pulk. I'm going to be pulling a pulk too. Let me train how to pull a pulk. Let me strengthen my leg muscles and my core muscles. So I looked at how to simulate a pulk, which was pulling tires. So I get some tires and I drive down to Hackney Marshes, which is like a park not far from where I lived. And I was still so embarrassed about the whole thing. I was still so, second guessing myself. And I decided, actually, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. So I start walking through the park. It's 11 o'clock at night, because at this point, I'm still ashamed of the idea a little bit. I've been told by so many people, black people don't do that. Jamaicans don't do that. We don't do. And by we, they're talking about people from Hackney or East London. So everyone's already told me it sounds a bit like a stupid idea. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm not going to embarrass myself by pulling tires through a park in the middle of the day and having people ask me what I'm doing. So I'll do it at night. It's 11 o'clock. I'm walking through Hackney Marshes. There's not a soul around. I start to feel good about myself. I start feeling like, yeah, actually my legs are starting to warm up. I'm aching. I feel like I'm training. And no sooner did I get this good euphoric feeling, then I walked around the corner and there's 8 or 9 of the thing that terrified me most, which is boys, teenage boys, 8 or 9 of them. And they're giggling and laughing and being boisterous. And I think to myself, right, if you turn around now, they won't see you. And as soon as I made that thought just manifest itself in my head, turn around now, I heard someone say, who's that and what's he doing? I was like, no, they've caught me. And at that point, I thought, no, do you know what? Suck it up. Raise your head, lift your head up, hold your chest out and walk past them. And I walked past and they laughed and they made jokes and they ridiculed and they insulted and they berated. And I felt so low and so small that I didn't actually go back to Hackney Marshes to train anymore. I started to train after midnight in Clissold Park, well off the path in the middle of one of the fields, just because that's how tough I found training. Obviously, the organization that I went with, they had their own training expeditions. One was in Norway. And again, for me, it was like, okay, you've come from Jamaica, gone to London. That's the coldest place you've known. You're now in the mountains in the north of Norway. It's minus 26. This is completely different to anything I've ever experienced before. Horrible, but I loved it because I was outside and I was doing things with like-minded people. Came back to London and thought, how do I keep training for the cold? So I ended up spending time in a cold chamber in Eastbourne. And this cold chamber is just a fridge. It's just a giant fridge that goes down to about -8, -9, -10. And I sit there in a pair of shorts and a vest with a thermometer about so long inside me. Yes, yeah. And that was part of my training. That was part of my training. Or so they say. But
that's what they told me.
I wonder if they lied to me. But it was all part of my training preparation. So for me, it was just, I was running from Stoke Newington in London to London Bridge and back. I was doing boxing. I was doing weighted walks. So I'd put a backpack on with 10, 15 kilos and I'd walk for 5, 6 hours in one direction and walk back again. I was running. I was doing all these things just to get fit and get prepared because I didn't want to fail, because everyone I'd spoken to about this idea, that's not fair actually. About 90% of people I've spoken to said, it's not for you. We don't do that. You're not prepared for it. Your body's not designed for it. You're not going to do it. Black people never do that. And little did they know that the first person there was a black man called Matthew Henson. So with all these people saying, you can't and you won't and you wouldn't and you shouldn't, and Phoebe knows it well. I know her story. The same doubts that people placed on her shoulders were the same doubts they placed on mine. And I think the reason we've managed to do these things was because we use the same thing to overcome it. It's not about getting there and beating your chest. It's about getting there and coming back with a story that's going to make someone else want to do it.
You both have two very exciting expeditions. I want to start with the one that you're doing with children, which is very brave, I think.
The whole idea behind both our joint expedition, but also this, was that we wanted to leave this lasting legacy. We have a motto for what we call We Too, which is, it's not about planting flags, it's about planting seeds, because it really is about inspiring that next generation. So we thought, rather than just be about going and trying to do something amazing ourselves, let's try and sort of plant that seed within the next generation, and how best can we do that? And I'm very fortunate that I've visited Antarctica before on an expedition ship. It was several years ago, and it was as a travel writer on assignment. And I remember it just absolutely blew my mind. And I already was, by that point, into the outdoors, into nature, but the way that you can step foot on a piece of land that potentially you are the only human that's ever stepped on that bit of land. You know, even now, it's so underexplored, undeveloped. The wildlife is not used to seeing people, so it comes the closest I've ever had wildlife come anywhere. You know, penguins are trying to jump in your rucksack. You know, whales are breaching right next to your little boat. So I wanted other people to experience that. And so the idea was to set up this We Too Foundation so that all the activities we do can raise money for this, with the idea being that in 20 we'll take a group of underprivileged young people from across Britain to Antarctica via expedition ship, and young people that will have probably seen images of polar explorers, will have probably seen pictures and told that the ice cap is melting in Antarctica, or the penguins are all being displaced because of the ice melting. But if you're a kid who lives in an area where you're told you don't go and do this, it doesn't mean anything to you. You can see all the pictures you want, but you can't connect with it. Whereas if we can take them out of their normal life and get them to show show them something that's absolutely amazing, that message is going to be amplified so much more, because when they go back to their communities, much like Dwayne did when he went to the North Pole, they're going to want to share what they've seen and what they've experienced with their friends. And then that will spread to be like, wow, someone from here went and did this really cool thing. And so it's a way of getting them to connect with the environment, with wildlife, with carbon neutral. And that's the other thing about it. We want to make them more aware of the environment and the impact we have on it, but also show that adventuring can be a force for good. We want to take them by expedition ship, so they'll be exposed to, you know, the scientists, the biologists, the geologists, the ornithologists. They can actually see that there are other careers that they could potentially look to do if they're interested in, that they may never have even heard of or know about. So it's just that real inspirational thing. And we have plans for them before we leave, which I think Dwayne will tell you about, with our carbon negative idea.
So one of the plans is that every young person that comes on board, that's part of this expedition, will pay for their trip by getting involved in local initiatives. There'll be local ambassadors. They'll be taking part in whether it's tree planting or whether it's just a lesson that they're going to be delivering to kids or younger kids or their peers. They're going to be involved. This is going to be the first ever carbon negative expedition of its kind, from start to finish. And this isn't just, let's pick up these kids, take them somewhere and leave them alone. No, this is about creating ambassadors in each community from people who, just like me, no one ever looked at and said, you're going to make something of yourself. It's for people just like Phoebe, who were told, yeah, people from this area don't leave this area, you never achieve anything. So it's about finding these young people who have the platforms or may not actually have the voice. They have the potential to share an amazing story and to inspire others, finding these young people and giving them that little leg up.
If anyone wants to donate to your foundation, how can they do it?
You can connect to our foundation through the teamwe2.com website. And on there's a donate button. You can read up all about what we're doing and where we're going to be doing our adventures, and where all the money will go towards. So please, teamwe2.com, and there's a Just Giving page on there as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much and good luck with it all.
Thank you.